My name is Brian Cronin, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this tutorial on approaching the EQE, the European Qualifying Examination for Patent Attorneys. This is the fourth approach, presenting arguments. This tutorial is part of a series of audio slideshows approaching the EQE, made up of 6 complementary approaches as follows: 1. Serving the client, 2. The working method, 3. Legal thinking, 4. The present tutorial presenting arguments, followed by 5. Substantive issues, and 6. Time management. Here we will deal with the fourth approach, presenting arguments. To start with, let's consider what is an argument in the context of the EQE. So, in the context of the EQE, an argument is a presentation of facts in support of a legal consequence. I repeat, facts in support of a legal consequence. All papers of the EQE involve arguments. Separate marks are awarded for arguments in papers B and C. They are for arguments for achieving predetermined legal consequences. In paper A, the description, the introduction to the description, constitutes an argument in support of compliance with Rule 42.1. In paper D, legal reasoning that brings in facts constitutes an argument supporting legal consequences. I suggest that we start by considering the argument structure for papers B and C. For these papers B and C, the arguments are all directed to a predetermined conclusion, which is the legal consequence. For example, the legal consequence could be novelty in paper A, or it could be lack of novelty in paper C. The legal consequence which results from a given legal provision making use of the given facts. For papers A and B, a powerful argument structure follows the maxim, tell them what you're going to tell them, which we can say is a header to the argument, then tell them, which is a factual demonstration, and then tell them what you told them, which is the conclusion to the argument. In more detail, the schematic outline for each and every argument in papers B and C is header, factual demonstration, which is a fact-driven argument, and conclusion. This structure is appropriate for papers B and C because both of these papers involve a suite or a sequence of arguments, and adopting this repetitive structure helps you to clearly separate your different arguments. It avoids arguments from running into one another. It introduces the reader to the argument you are about to make. It highlights the factual demonstration sandwiched between the header and the conclusion, and it brings the argument to a powerful conclusion. Let's now consider the argument structure in more detail. Here on the left I have the argument structure, and on the right I have an example from a theoretical opposition paper. So first is the header. The header can set out an announcement of the legal consequence you are going to reach from a given provision, and a typical header for the opposition paper would be Claim 1 lacks novelty, Article 54.2 EPC over Annex 3, or you could have a more neutral header saying Claim 1 novelty, Article 54.2 EPC over Annex 3. The header is followed by the factual demonstration, which brings in all of the facts necessary to reach the conclusion. And here I've given an abbreviated example, which we will do in greater detail afterwards. Annex 3 is equated to Claim 1 by a word-by-word equation showing that Annex 3 discloses all of the features of Claim 1. That will be the factual demonstration. Then we come to the conclusion. The conclusion brings the argument to a conclusive end, and in our example, the conclusion could be, as Annex 3 discloses all of the features of Claim 1 in combination, Claim 1 is not novel, Article 54.2 EPC. The essence of the argument is the factual demonstration. The header and the conclusion place the factual demonstration in its context. Next slide is an example of a word-by-word equation, which I have called a fact-driven argument for lack of novelty. On the left, I have introduced a notional claim to a device for peeling potatoes comprising a handle 3 and a blade 5 extending from the handle, characterized in that the blade 5 has a cutting edge 7 adjacent to slot 9 for the passage of potato peel 11. So that's the notional claim that we want to show is lacking novelty over document D1. So then we say D1 discloses, and we repeat all of the words of the claim. All of the words of the claim on the right-hand side are shown in bold typeface, and we equate each feature of the claim with its counterpart from D1. So the word-by-word equation can, for example, read as follows. D1 discloses a device for peeling tomatoes, title. This device is suitable for peeling various items, including potatoes, reference to the guidelines Roman 4, 4.13. It has a handle in the form of a grip 4, see figure 1. A blade 6 extends from the handle grip, see paragraph 2. Blade 6 has a cutting edge, sharp edge 8, adjacent and elongated aperture 10, paragraph 4, through which tomato peelings 12 pass, forming a slot suitable for the passage of potato peel. Credit is available for the facts imported from the reference document as equated to the claimed features, also for an identification of the reference from where the fact is extracted, and how convincing the argument is. Before turning to a format-driven argument, here are a few problems to avoid with the header demonstration conclusion argument structure we have just seen. Major faults with this argument structure could therefore be a disparity between the header and the conclusion. For instance, the header announces lack of novelty and the conclusion concludes lack of inventive step. Obviously, that is a problem. The introduction can be overcomplicated by making it into a fully fledged sentence. It is not necessary to use verbose statements as an introduction. All that is needed is a streamlined header, preferably underlined, like the example header I showed you. A third problem is no beef. Here you spend, if you have spent all of your energy repeating the headers and conclusions and neglected to beef up the factual demonstration, your argument is not going to get any or very little credit. So you must concentrate always on the factual demonstration in your argument and not neglect it to the detriment of having a series of headers and conclusions. Another common error is to come to an intermediate conclusion or an unwarranted intermediate conclusion where you come to the final conclusion halfway down the factual demonstration, then the argument rolls on until it peters out. Next, we turn to fact-driven and format-driven arguments, which we will illustrate with inventive step using the problem and solution format. Here now, a fact-driven argument which we have just seen is produced essentially by amalgamating facts from different documents, starting from the facts. For a format-driven argument, you can start from the format and insert the relevant facts in the appropriate places. To illustrate a format-driven argument, we're going to go step by step through the successive steps of the problem and solution approach. Each step of the problem solution approach invites a formatted presentation integrating more or less standardized wordings. Some of the steps of the problem and solution approach boil down to fact-driven arguments. It's like a series of fact-driven arguments presented in the prescribed format and the prescribed sequence. What then are the steps for the format-driven argument? I have indicated in bold on the left-hand side some standard wordings as part of the format. You need to have various standard wordings at your fingertips, and if you are new to this type of argument, you can build up a set of standard wordings as prompts that you can keep beside you and copy. Let's go through the arguments where I have taken the notional invention of a burger for its investigation of inventive step. The first step in the problem and solution approach is the closest prior art, and here we begin the argument by stating D2 is the closest prior art because, like claim 1, it concerns a burger and it pursues the same aim, namely to provide a delicious burger, D2 paragraph 4. You always have to begin with selection of the closest prior art, and you must state convincing factual reasons why a particular document is chosen, quoting facts from the claim and the prior document. So on the left-hand side, in bold characters are the standard wordings, and in thinner typeface are the factual insertions. You have to avoid fact-devoid, fit-all stock phrases like D2 is the closest prior art because it has most features in common and pursues the same aim. Now, I'll dwell on this point a little bit because in the examiner's report, they criticize year in, year out the arguments given for the selection of the closest prior art. Now, the standard phrases such as D2 is the closest prior art because it has the most features in common and pursues the same aim correspond to statements from the case law which you can equate with legal provisions, and you have to show provide the facts which justify this legal provision. So you can include your stock phrases in your argument, but you must add namely, and then you must always add the facts of the case. So be very, very careful on your justification of the closest prior art to always include facts. The justification of prior art does not have to be long, but it must include some facts. Next step is, I just missed some points there. In the B paper, it can be useful to explain why the other documents, why documents 2, 3, and 4 were considered to be more remote, whereas in the opposition paper C, it is generally sufficient to say why the particular document is closest, and it's not necessary to discuss the other documents. Next step is the differentiating feature. So we begin the differentiating feature with a more or less standard phrase. The difference between Claim 1's burger over that of Annex 3 is that the filling includes onion rings. Varied wordings are possible, and it's desirable that you have several different possible wordings, especially for paper C, where you could state instead Claim 1's burger is differentiated from Annex 3 in that its filling includes onion rings, or the differentiating feature of Claim 1 over Annex 3 is that. So you can have different ways of saying the same thing, providing you include the facts which make the factual difference. So you have to bring in the facts from the documents, you have to state the differentiating features of the claim over the prior art, and you are not supposed to state how the prior art differentiates over the claim. In other words, you don't say the difference is that Annex 3's filling does not include onion rings. So next we come to the effect of the differentiating feature. Here we can begin our argument by saying the technical effect of this differentiating feature is that, and then we go on, the onion rings confer a distinctive onion taste, Annex 1, paragraph 05. You have to state the technical effect associated with the claim's distinguishing feature, and you have to identify the source of the technical effect. And in the EQE, it's fairly simple because the technical effect is usually, and in fact always in the EQE, derived from the counterpart of the claimed feature in the application or the patent's description. Having set out the differentiating feature, we have to articulate the objective problem, which we could, for example, state as follows. The objective problem solved by Claim 1 can therefore be expressed as to provide a tastier burger. Don't include elements of the solution in the objective problem. Here is an example not to follow. The problem is to provide a burger with an onion taste. That puts the solution in the problem. Note that the objective problem is somewhat subjective because it can be expressed in different ways by different people. That's why it's better, or that's why I prefer to use the conditional can therefore be expressed instead of the problem is to provide, as though there is only one particular way of expressing the objective problem. Next is obviousness of the solution as for paper C, and we will consider the conclusion unobviousness for paper B later. Here now we're continuing the problem and solution approach as in paper C, for opposition, arguing for obviousness. So we could put in a header obviousness of the solution, but the header is not essential. And we can start the argument by saying, starting from Annex 3, the skilled person faced with the problem of, and now we repeat the objective problem, providing a tastier burger, will refer to related food items where taste is an issue. And it's quite good practice to explain why the skilled person would consider or would go to documents in related or in neighboring fields. We continue the argument. He in particular knows about Annex 4 sandwich, which is a comparable food item with a tasty filling enclosed between two edible layers, bread slices for the sandwich and buns for a burger. Here we are explaining why the document is related and why it is comparable. What it discloses comes on the next slide. We continued the argument then. Annex 4 discloses the same filling as that of Claim 1, see paragraph 3 of Annex 4, and also discloses that a delicious onion flavor is procured when the bacon 7 is replaced by a salad onion ring mixture 15, see paragraph 4, lines 2 to 3, again of Annex 4. Here we are explaining the relevant information the related document discloses, and this is a statement of the facts, and you must always quote the sources of where you import your facts. The argument then continues. By following this teaching, the skilled person will be led to replace Annex 3's bacon with a salad onion ring mixture, which will result in a burger having two buns enclosing layers of cheese, salad onion rings, mixed beef, and ketchup. Here, where the obviousness stems from the combination of two documents, we have to explain why it was obvious to make the combination between the documents, and we have to explain what the combination leads to. Let's now continue the argument on the next slide. The argument runs on. This constitutes an embodiment of Claim 1 because the claim defines its filling with the open word having. The extra presence of the salad with the onion rings therefore remains within the subject matter covered by the claim. This is explaining why the combined subject matter is within the claim, so the skilled person would reach the claim subject matter by the combination. Now we come to the conclusion, or the penultimate paragraph of the conclusion. It follows that the skilled person reaches Claim 1's burger by the routine substitution of Annex 3's bacon with Annex 4's salad onion rings, as is specifically taught by Annex 4 to enhance the taste. And this part of the argument is the penultimate, it's the last but one paragraph of the argument, and this is the part of the argument which very often degenerates into an assertion, and this is the most difficult part of the argument to remain with good wording. And we'll see the conclusion in the next slide. Conclusion of the argument then is, therefore, Claim 1 must be considered obvious within the meaning of Article 56 EPC, or must be considered obvious and lacking an inventive step within the meaning of Article 56 EPC. This conclusion more or less mirrors the introductory header that we would have used, and what I would like to warn you is that you must at all costs avoid an assertive finishing part of the argument as follows. It was obvious for the skilled person to replace Annex 3's bacon with Annex 4's onion rings. This leads in an obvious manner to Claim 1. Therefore, Claim 1 is obvious and lacks inventive step. As you can see, this reasoning boils down to it's obvious because it's obvious, therefore it's obvious. This is circular reasoning. If you should find that in your writings you have assertions of this type, you should replace the statement, it was obvious for the skilled person to blah, blah, blah at the beginning, with a different, an alternative wording, such as Annex 4 teaches the skilled person to avoid making this assertion, it was obvious for the skilled person. Just as a guide, it's useful if you would avoid using the word obvious until the very last line of your conclusion. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it's for the safety of your arguments. Now we will consider a specimen part of the problem and solution format, arguing in support of inventiveness, as in paper B. Now we are considering non-obviousness, paper B. I've highlighted the standard wordings, which contrast to the standard wordings used for the obviousness attack. And the argument can run as follows. Starting from the closest prior art, Annex 3, the skilled person has no incentive to improve the taste because paragraph 2 of Annex 3 states that the success of its burger comes from the unique taste of its filling of cheese, minced beef and ketchup, unchanged and never improved upon since 1955. It follows that the skilled person would not want to change the composition of the filling, so he would not arrive at the subject matter of Claim 1 in any obvious way from Annex 3 alone. So the first part of the argument for paper B will normally be an argument analyzing why the skilled person would not reach the claimed subject matter in an obvious way from the teaching of the closest prior art alone. The last part on the left-hand side, Claim 1 is in any obvious way from Annex 3 alone. This is an intermediate conclusion for non-obvious, considering the closest prior art on its own. Next, we will try and explain why the skilled person was not motivated to consult the secondary document. And here we will start with some fairly standard wording, such as, faced with the problem of improving the burger's taste, it is highly unlikely that the skilled person would turn to Annex 4, which relates to a different type of food item, namely a sandwich with a sandwich filling between slices of bread. So first we show why the skilled person would not want to, or in all probability, would not consult the secondary document. Then we continue the argument, which goes on, even if the skilled person were to consider Annex 4, he will not find any teaching relevant to improving the taste of a burger. So this introduces the next part of the argument, why a postulated combination of the documents would not lead to the claimed subject matter. So we go to the next slide. And the argument reads on, Annex 4's variant where onion rings are added to the sandwich filling 8 is applicable to Annexes 4 sandwich, which is prepared at room temperature and cool and stored cool, paragraph 5, but clearly is not applicable to a toasted burger, Annex 1, paragraph 6. There is no suggestion or teaching that the skilled person would be encouraged to apply this variant to a burger prepared by toasting. Moreover, as pointed out above, Annex 3 provides no incentive for improving the taste of its burger. So this part of the argument explains why the skilled person would not combine the teachings, and alternatively it could explain why a postulated combination would not lead to the claimed subject matter. Then we come to an intermediate conclusion for the combination A3 plus A4. The skilled person cannot therefore arrive at the subject matter of Claim 1 by any obvious combination of Annex 3 and Annex 4. So that is an intermediate, second intermediate conclusion, and we could end up the overall argument with one jumbo conclusion or a simpler conclusion. The jumbo conclusion would be, as the subject matter of Claim 1 cannot be reached in any obvious way from the closest state of the art, Annex 3, possibly taking into account Annex 4 or other annexes, Claim 1 should be considered to involve an inventive step within the meaning of Article 56 EPC. As I said, this is an overall conclusion for the two parts of the argument. considering the closest prior art and its combinations, and a simpler conclusion probably that you would want to use in the EQE would just be to say, it follows that claim 1 involves an inventive step, Article 56 EPC. This brings our discussion of inventive step arguments to an end. Next, we will deal with a different argument structure, placing the conclusion first. Here I have taken some arguments on novelty. The arguments run: claim 1 is novel over D1 because D1's potato peeler does not have a slot adjacent to a cutting edge. In other words, the conclusion is at the beginning. Claim 1 is novel over D2 because D2 discloses a cucumber slicer that is not suitable for peeling potatoes. Again, the conclusion is first. Or claim 1 is novel over D3 because D3's device for peeling tomatoes has a blade, but this blade extends from body 9, not from a handle. This alternative argument structure, placing the conclusion first, is widely used by the EPO. In other words, put the legal consequence at the beginning. The given example that I've given to you corresponds to an argument for the novelty in paper B, and the argument could be finished with an overall conclusion, such as, for example, as claim 1 is not comprised in the state-of-the-art represented by D1, D2, and D3, it is considered novel under Article 54.3 EPC. Now we turn to legal arguments for paper D. When you make legal arguments for paper D, you can arrange the essential ingredients of the argument, that is fact, legal provision, legal consequence, and advice, in any convenient order, depending on the structure of the question and your own personal approach. Next, follow two specimen answers for a part of a D1 question, which I've structured in different ways, just to illustrate the fact that answers can have different structures. I've taken as an example question 5A of the 2014 legal paper D, and I don't have the question on the slides, but the relevant part of this question reads as follows. The application was refused by a decision dated 6th of August 2013. On 1st of October 2013, the applicant filed a notice of appeal. On 4th of October 2013, he paid the fee for appeal and requested reimbursement of that fee. On 28 November 2013, the applicant filed a statement of the grounds of appeal together with blah, blah, blah. The applicant seeks your advice and has the following questions, and the first question is, A, is the appeal admissible? And we're dealing only with the answer to part A of question 5 in the following slides. So the first, as the question was, is the appeal admissible? It can be answered yes or no. In the first answer begins, yes, the appeal is admissible. In other words, we put the answer or the conclusion at the beginning of the legal reasoning. Then it's followed by a legal statement quoting Rule 101 and Article 108 EPC. Under Rule 101 EPC, an appeal is admissible if it complies inter alia with Article 108 EPC, which is a legal provision paraphrased, and Article 108 EPC specifies the notice of appeal shall be filed within 2 months of notification of the decision, which is a paraphrase of the legal provision. The notice of appeal shall not be deemed to be filed until the fee for appeal has been paid, which is the legal provision paraphrased, and a statement of grounds of appeal is filed within 4 months of notification of the decision, and this is the legal provision paraphrased. The argument is continued over leaf, and now we go into the facts. The answer continues, the decision was dated 6th of August 2013 and deemed notified on 16 August, Rule 126 EPC. This is fact, legal consequence, and legal provision. The argument continues, the due date 2 months from 16 August 2013 was 16 October 2013, Rule 1314 EPC. This is paraphrase, legal provision, fact, legal consequence, and legal provision. The appeal was filed on 1st of October and was deemed to be filed on 4th of October when the fee was paid, Article 108, second sentence, so fact, legal consequence, fact, legal provision. This is before the due date 16 October 2013, therefore the notice of appeal was timely filed. This is a fact and a legal consequence. We continue the argument over leaf. The statement of grounds was filed 26 November, which is a fact, before the due date 4 months from 16th of August, which is a fact from the previous legal consequence, i.e. 16 December 2013, legal consequence, Article 108 EPC, third sentence, legal provision. And then we say all other conditions of Rule 101 EPC appear to be implicitly met. This is assumed. And there is a conclusion which repeats the conclusion at the beginning of the argument. Consequently, the appeal is admissible. And that is the conclusion and the end of the argument. Let's now consider the same answer to a different answer to the same question, structured in a different fashion. Here we begin with the facts. The decision was dated 6 August 2013 and was deemed notified on 16 August, Rule 1262 EPC. So this is a fact. Deemed notified on 16 August is a legal consequence, and Rule 126 is the legal provision. The argument continues. The appeal was filed 1st of October and was deemed to be filed on 4th of October 2014 when the fee was paid, Article 108 EPC, second sentence, and this is a statement of the fact, 1st of October, the legal consequence deemed to be filed, and the legal provision. The notice of appeal was due within 2 months from notification of the decision, Article 108 EPC, first sentence, which was 16 October 2013, Rule 1314 EPC. So this is paraphrased legal provision, the legal provision, Article 108, the legal consequence, 16th of October, and the legal provision, Rule 1314 EPC. And there is an intermediate conclusion, which is the legal consequence. Therefore, the notice of appeal was timely filed. The statement of grounds was filed 28 November 2013, which is a fact. The statement of grounds was due within 4 months of notification of the decision, Article 108 EPC, third sentence, which was 16 December 2013, Rule 1314 EPC. This is a paraphrased legal provision, legal consequence, and a legal provision. Therefore, the statement of grounds was timely filed. This is a legal consequence and is an intermediate conclusion. And there we put also assuming that all other conditions of Rule 101 were met, which is implicit, the appeal is admissible, which is the consequence and the answer to the question. So you may want to take that question and use your own structure to answer the question. I think the second answer was probably more streamlined than the first one, but I would recommend that when you answer part one questions as part of your practice, that you answer the same question using different formats to test the different ways that you can write up the answer. Next is a specimen extract from a D2 answer. This extract was taken from my own answer from paper D2 2012, question 1. This is how the argument began. EP1 was filed 31st of July 2007 without claims, which is sufficient to establish a filing date and hence establish a priority date. It was subsequently abandoned, which does not affect its validity as a priority application. EP1 was the first application by MEM for a module, and the argument runs on. And on the right-hand side of the slide, I've analyzed the structure of the answer, and it was fact, fact, legal consequence, fact, legal consequence, facts. And in fact, the last fact, EP was the first application. Being the first application, it's going to be the relevant fact for the next legal consequence. So what you can note then is that D2 arguments consist of a string of facts and legal consequences. There is no need to identify the legal provisions. Advice follows in the latter part of the D2 questions. Only facts that produce legal consequences count. You get no credit whatsoever for reciting facts that don't lead to legal consequences, which we will illustrate on the next slide. Here is how not to present your answer for D2. A mere factual statement or a summary of the facts from the question without any legal consequences. EP1 was filed 31st of July 2007 without claims and was subsequently abandoned. It covers a module comprising a bundle B of fibers of any suitable material and a specially designed nozzle of any suitable material, and thus is just a litany of facts, one after the other, without putting in any legal conclusion whatsoever. So you will get no credit whatsoever by simply summarizing the factual situation. Mere factual summaries do not constitute arguments. Next, we will go to an unsubstantiated assertion. Mere assertions are not arguments. Making an assertion which is not substantiated with relevant facts does not constitute an argument and attracts no credit in the EQE. Here is an example of an unsubstantiated assertion. Claim 1 is novel over Annex 2 because Annex 2 does not disclose all of the features of Claim 1. Here is a corresponding argument. Claim 1 is novel over Annex 2 because Claim 1 requires a blade extending from a handle, whereas Annex 2's device has a blade, but this blade extends from body 9, not from a handle. So it's possible to include an assertion, Claim 1 is novel over Annex 2. You could repeat the unsubstantiated assertion because Annex 2 does not disclose all the features of Claim 1, but then you have to continue, namely because, and then you repeat as in the second argument. You have to bring in the facts. Now, it's very common to find assertions in the EQE answers from candidates, and it happens most frequently in justifying the closest prior art, which we mentioned earlier, in the penultimate paragraph for an argument for obviousness, which we also mentioned earlier. So take care not to put mere assertions into your answers without always substantiating the assertion with the necessary facts. Next is an overall summary of presenting arguments for the EQE. As stated at the outset, In the context of the EQE, an argument is a presentation of facts in support of a legal consequence. I repeat, facts supporting a legal consequence. Arguments are fact-loaded, they are fact-heavy. An assertion that is not substantiated with facts is not an argument and gets no credit. We have seen that arguments for or against novelty are asymmetric. To argue for novelty, you just have to show there is one differentiating feature. To argue against novelty, you have to show that all of the features are in the prior art document, and they are fact-driven. Arguments for or against inventive step using the format-driven problem and solution approach are symmetrical and differ only in the contrasted concluding step, either for or against obviousness. Legal arguments are flexible, fact, legal provision, legal consequence in the order that you like, and you have to structure your arguments differently for the different papers of the EQE. Let's now consider how to present arguments for the different papers. For paper A, as mentioned earlier, the introduction to the description is a formatted argument for compliance with Rule 42. So you should generate your introduction bearing Rule 42 in mind. For papers B and C, the reply to the communication and opposition, you have to select and present the facts that lead to the predetermined legal consequences, which would be, shall we say, novelty or inventive step, or the lack of novelty and the lack of inventive step. For paper D1, you have to present fact, legal provision, legal consequence advice in a flexible structure that is adapted according to the situation and to your own personal approach. For paper D2, you have to present fact, legal consequence advice with possible paraphrasing of legal provisions, but without quoting the legal basis. Overall, in the EQE, there is high credit for arguments that bring in all of the relevant facts. So what is next? Next in this series of tutorials on approaching the EQE is a tutorial entitled Substantive Law, where we will discuss how novelty and inventive step are tested from different angles in all papers of the EQE, and how errors in novelty, saying it's not novel when it's novel and vice versa, and inventive step can be fatal. I look forward to your participation in the next tutorial and the following tutorials of the series. Now, here are some closing words. This brings our tutorial on presenting arguments to an end. I hope it has been of value to you and that you have a better idea that an argument is a presentation of facts in support of a legal consequence, and you have a better idea how to present your arguments. Be on the lookout for upcoming tutorials on other EQE subjects that I will announce on the PatSkills blogspot. For further guidance on EQE preparation, you can consult, and I recommend that you do consult, the book EQE Comprehensive, available on the web, on the internet, from the site createmybookinoneword.com. Search word is PatSkills. That was formerly called shopmybook.com. À bientôt.